What's up, guys? Today we're doing a little bit of a list, a little bit of a countdown. I'm going to be covering what are the 10 best soundtracks in fighting games. Obviously, I'm a huge fighting game fan. I play them all the time. And really, I think that having a good soundtrack can make such a major difference in how enjoyable the game is. Because you're going to be grinding these games like all day, trying to learn the combos, trying to get better. So having something good to listen to while you do it is really important. So we're going to be covering, in my opinion, this is all obviously very subjective. This is just how I feel about the top 10 fighting game soundtracks. If you guys have different opinions, I would love to hear them down in the comments. Please be civil, guys. I know that this is a heated topic for some of you, but this is just how I feel about it. And to be clear, I'm only going to be including one game per series, so I didn't want to clog up the list if I include like Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 3, Street Fighter Alpha. Only one game per series, so that should provide a little bit of variety here. And with that, let's jump into the list, guys, and get started with number 10. I hope you enjoy. Guys, real quick, I want to talk about the sponsor for today's video, Boxu. Boxu is a Japanese snack box subscription service that serves up delicious snacks straight from Japan to your door. The snacks are specifically selected to fit each month's theme. The theme of this box is tropical travel. So we're visiting the south of Japan to enjoy some of the tastes of summer. I really like how Boxu includes this guide that lets you know specifically where each item in the box is from, as well as a breakdown of the snack and sort of its history. Guys, you don't even know, the hardest part of doing these promotions is that I can't just eat all the snacks until I'm done showing them to you. But you know, now that we're here, I have been wanting to try these fried citrus senbei. Let's see how these are. Ooh! Ooh, that's so good! It's sour. It's very sour, but it's salty and delicious. I love it. Boxu sources its snacks from local artisanal makers across Japan, helping support family-owned businesses, some of which have been around for 100+ years. You can sign up today to get your first box, which will be the Seasons of Japan. Let me tell you, the Seasons of Japan is a primo box. I highly recommend it, but make sure that you use the link down below to get 10% off your first order. You can save up to $47. So thank you to you guys for using that link, and then thank you to Boxu, of course, for helping continue to sponsor the channel. These guys are really amazing, so make sure you check them out, guys. Get your snacks. It's so worth it. Alright, starting things out on the top 10 fighting game soundtracks. At number 10, we've got Persona 4 Arena. So this game obviously has a little bit of an advantage coming in, considering it's based on Persona 4, which has a really amazing soundtrack itself. And there's lots of great remixes of tracks from that game in Persona 4 Arena, as well as a bunch of new stage themes and character themes and stuff like that. Lots of great vocals. Some people may find the rapping a little bit corny, but personally I like it quite a bit. I think it goes along with the feel of the game really well. So I know we're all definitely wishing that they'll eventually make a Persona 5 Arena. I know the soundtrack to that would be really incredible as well. But for now, at least we've got Persona 4 Arena. Really excellent soundtrack. Very nicely done by Atlus and Arc System Works here. So next up, coming in at number 9, we've got Skullgirls. Skullgirls has a pretty unique soundtrack. It's very jazzy, very heavily inspired by sort of the early 20th century. It kind of goes along with the Art Deco feel of the game. We've got some really great tracks in here, including some that were composed by Michiru Yamane, who also composed the soundtrack for Castlevania Symphony of the Night. So I think when you first start playing this game, it might catch you a little bit off guard. It's a little bit unusual for a fighting game. It's not like thumping bass or anything like that, but the melodies will really get in your head, and some of the instrumentation is really fun as well, and some more great vocals on this soundtrack as well. So I really, really enjoy the Skullgirls soundtrack. Next up, coming in at number 8, we've got King of Fighters 13. It was hard for me to choose which King of Fighters game to include here, but I went with 13 because I feel like it has a great mix of sort of the old school synth style that we've seen from fighting games throughout the 90s and the early 2000s. As opposed to KOF 14 is a little bit more clean, it's a little bit more high fidelity, but it doesn't really have that same old school fighting game feel that I love in 13. 13 obviously brings in all the themes that we've heard throughout the series. There are so many characters in this game, and there are a lot of great team themes here as well. This is definitely the kind of soundtrack where this just blends into the background and you can listen to this all day while you're spending hours upon hours grinding out the really hard trial mode combos in KOF 13. So really big fan of this one, and I think it fits the mood and the art style of the rest of the game really perfectly. So next up, coming in at number 7 is Killer Instinct. So this is Killer Instinct 2013, released for the Xbox One and later on PC. And man, this soundtrack is full of bangers. It's got a very cohesive style. It's got sort of this hard rock and roll mixed with a little bit of electronic, maybe a little bit of a dubstep feel on some of the tracks. And if you look at the art style of this game, it's so over the top. The screen is just full of sparks and explosions and crazy screen shake, and the soundtrack fits that feel perfectly. It is an assault on the senses. Almost nothing was like walking into a big tournament like EVO when this game was being played on the Jumbotron and just hearing that booming bass echoing all throughout the venue. Really incredible musical choices here. They've created something really unique, and no other game sounds like this one does. I think it really matches the game well and makes for a brain-rattling experience. So that's Killer Instinct at number 7. Coming in at number 6 is Marvel vs. Capcom 1. So I think this might be one of the more controversial picks on the list. I ended up going with Marvel 1 over Marvel 2. Obviously, I love the Marvel 2 soundtrack. It's very weird, it's very unusual, it doesn't have character themes, it's just these jazzy tracks that don't even sound like they're from a fighting game. But Marvel 1 is the classic. It's got some of the themes that you'll know and love from these Capcom characters from their Street Fighter games and other games like that. We've got those themes remixed and returning, as well as this game created some of the new themes that have been sort of part of these Marvel characters in the future games to come. So they have a lot of great melodies that have lasted and shown up in games like Marvel vs. Capcom 3 decades later. And the old school feel of the game, it's definitely on the older side. It's not as high fidelity as some of the newer games on the list, but I just think it sounds perfect. It matches the bright, shining lights and the neon techno feel of the game really amazingly. And these tracks just get stuck in your head and they don't leave. I love the instrumentation. The sound of the MIDI, I think, is perfect. And if you walk through an arcade back in the day and you see and hear this attract screen, it can't help but draw you in. So I had to give the shout out to Marvel vs. Capcom 1 at number 6. Coming in at number 5 is definitely a favorite of a lot of my fellow YouTubers. We're going with Under Night in Birth. This soundtrack, I love how it has this cohesive feeling with the instrumentation. You hear the same sort of piano sound. The octave piano notes show up on a lot of these songs, and it sort of gives all the songs this feeling that they come from the same game, as opposed to other games where it just sounds like a collection of tracks that maybe don't have as much in common. A lot of the themes here have really insane note runs, like piano rolls, that sound really, really impossible to play in real life, but thankfully I'm pretty sure this was all done in synth. It's got great bass as well. It just is the kind of thing that you can jam to. I think that there's a good reason why, if you listen to a lot of YouTube videos, even outside of the fighting game genre, people use these tracks in the background because they're just so catchy. They're just the kind of thing that you could listen to and never get tired of. So I think Under Night in Birth really, really nailed it, and that's why it's coming in at number 5 on the list. Coming in at number 4 is a game that was so far ahead of its time when it comes to soundtracks. It's Guilty Gear XX. Guilty Gear is another series where it was hard to pick just one game, but I went with XX or X2 because I think it just has some of the best themes. These themes are so incredible for the time with the CD quality music that we got on the PlayStation 2, they could really do some crazy stuff, delivering music that really sounds like it's off of an old rock and roll record. It's got the shredding guitars, it's got the pounding drums, and what I think takes this soundtrack to the next level is that not every song sounds the same either. There's a lot of great variety here. Things like May's theme, I think, are a nice break. It's a little bit more upbeat. It sounds more like something you might hear in Sonic Adventure as opposed to the hard rock of most of the other tracks. So I think that you can listen to this for a long time and never get bored because there's so much variety, and it really lays down this theming of what Guilty Gear is supposed to look and sound like, and it matches in with the feeling of the characters so well since they're all rock and roll references. So the Guilty Gear XX soundtrack still holds up. It hasn't aged a day. Really, really good stuff. That's why it's number 4. Coming in at number 3, I am going with Tekken 7. It was hard to pick just one Tekken game, guys, but Tekken 7 has such an incredible soundtrack. They really went out to left field on this one. The overarching theme of Tekken 7's soundtrack, I would say, is dubstep. There are a lot of dubstep sounding songs on here, a lot of electronic, a lot of insane pounding bass, like what we heard on the Killer Instinct soundtrack as well. But similar to Guilty Gear, there's a lot of great songs that sort of break that mold as well. Infinite Azure, probably the most famous track from this. It's just got these soft, inviting pianos. It's got that thumping 8th note bass. I think more than anything, the Tekken 7 soundtrack gets you pumped up, which is really what you want from a fighting game soundtrack. It matches up with the pace and the flow of the game so well with these rapid juggle combos. This is another one where when some of these songs come on, you just want to crank your speakers all the way to the max and make your room shake. So I'm a huge fan of the Tekken 7 soundtrack. It's coming in at number 3. Next up at number 2, we've got Capcom vs. SNK 2. So this game was built on the Naomi platform, which was sort of the hardware that went along with the Dreamcast. And when Sega jumped to this new hardware, they really took advantage of it when it comes to music. The instrumentation on this is really next level. It's heavily inspired by hip-hop, by electronic dance music. There's great vocals on a lot of these songs. I think True Love Making, probably the most famous song from this soundtrack, but there's a lot of other bangers as well. And then they sort of took the experimental step with the graphics of the game of making 3D backgrounds with the 2D sprites layered on top. And I think thematically that sort of old school meets new school theme is reflected in the soundtrack as well, because it's got this new school, very clean, modern sounding production quality mixed with the old school fighting game feel that the soundtrack still carries. So I think they really nailed it with this one. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 might be a more famous soundtrack from the Dreamcast era, but I think in terms of like listenability and fitting the look and feel of the game well, Capcom vs. SNK 2 nailed it 100% perfectly. So very nice job on that one. That's number 2, the runner-up for the whole list. But what's coming in at number 1 here? I had no choice but to put Street Fighter III Third Strike at number 1. This soundtrack is out of this world. They really went in a different direction with this one, and I think it paid off perfectly. They took a lot of influences from drum and bass music. You can hear a lot of sampled drum tracks on this that were actually used off of sample CDs that you can hear in different songs throughout other genres. Like you can actually hear hip-hop songs that use the same drum beats as some of the Third Strike songs. This was one of the first fighting game soundtracks I can remember that took a lot of influences from hip-hop. There's rap vocals on like the character select theme and the attract screen theme. This is another one where a lot of the melodies that they composed here, like Ibuki theme, Makoto theme, Dudley theme, this would show up in future games as well. These are just classic songs that were so ahead of their time, but at the same time they feel completely timeless. I have basically nothing but positive things to say about the Street Fighter III Third Strike soundtrack. I think they nailed it. It's perfect. Some of my favorite fighting game songs ever all made their way on here. So that is why I'm throwing it in at number 1. But I want to hear from you guys. What do you think? Did I blow it? Did I nail it? What are some games that didn't make the list that you think deserve spots? I know I probably have some blind spots in terms of fighting games that I've played a lot. So let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons and ring that bell so you always see when I have new videos coming out. That is going to be it for the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. and I will see you in the next one.